Hey there, my name is Eric and I'm with Seattle PowerAppers, and I'm going to teach you today how to quickly deploy an Azure SQL Server, database, and contained database user using bash scripting on Linux. I'm going to try to fly through this because no one likes a long video. So, without further ado, our agenda is going to be first to customize the bash installation script that I'm providing you. We are going to execute that script and then verify the installation on Azure Portal. We're next going to connect to that SQL database using VS Code, a text editor, and a special extension called MS SQL. And then finally, we're going to create a contained database user and some roles so that this database becomes portable. So, some prerequisites here. This video assumes that you've already set up your Azure Cloud account. There will be a nominal fee with following this tutorial, so watch out for that. This video also assumes that you are using Ubuntu Linux or some similar flavor. You might be able to use the Windows subsystem for Linux as well if you're on Windows 10. This tutorial also assumes that you have VS Code installed with the MS SQL extension. Again, we're going to be using VS Code to customize our bash script, and then we're going to be using the MS SQL extension to actually query our database once we get it set up. You'll also need the Azure command line interface installed. You're basically going to use this to log into your Azure account using the command line, and then when we execute our bash script, the Azure CLI will pass your credentials to your Azure account. So, first thing you're going to need to do is download the installation script provided here in the notes below, and you're going to need to make that script executable. So if you don't know how to do that on Linux, go ahead and Google how to make a bash script executable. Once you have the script downloaded, let's take a peek at it. This script was taken partly from the good Microsoft documentation here that you'll find in the script comments. I've customized this a bit for my use and for your use. It provisions, a local SQL server for me here in the West, and I walk through some best practices here. So just take a peek. The nice thing is you only need to define 6 or 8 variables in order for this script to work. So the variables look like this: variable on the left, equals sign, and then value on the right. Okay? So we're going to be filling in these variables, and I give you all some hint text above to get you on the right track. So the first thing is, which Azure location are you in right now? In my case, I'm in West US. There's also East US, Central US. Google it if you need to know what location is closest to you. You'll want to deploy your services most of the time close to where you are geographically, unless you're spread across the country, and then you'll have to make some different decisions there. The next thing we're going to define is our resource group. So a resource group is like a large bucket, if you will, that is used for everything from micro billing. So if you have a large organization and one department needs a set of services, you can stick everything in the same resource group and then allocate billing to that resource group. It's also used for managing services, so you can spin up a bunch of services inside of a resource group bucket, and then you can delete them all at once by getting rid of the resource group as well. So go ahead and name your resource group something logical. I put a -RG off the end just to make it differentiated a bit. You can also do a -random or anything that bash supports out of the box. You're then going to name your server. So again, name it something logical, maybe -serve. I'll leave your naming conventions up to you. You're then going to define a SQL Server admin password and username and password. I would recommend these being long, complicated, capital and lowercase letters, numbers, special characters. You got to be careful. You might have to escape those in the bash script itself. I just created these real quick using a password manager. The next thing you need to do is to create, or I should say input your IP address where you're executing this script from, because we're going to need to create a firewall rule in our Azure instance. And so this right here is going to define the IP address where you're running the script from, because again, by default, a managed SQL Server instance is completely locked down. And so you'll have to poke a hole in the firewall here. A quick way that I like doing or determining my IP address is to run curl what is it? IP config me. Let's see, I have it in the notes here. ifconfig.me. And it responds with your IP address there. So you'll just copy this out and paste it into your script here. You can define an entire range, if you wanted to do a whole subnet. I'm just doing a single computer at this time. The last variable that you're going to need to define here is a database name. And so again, stick with your own naming convention, -db, -random, whatever you'd like to do. From then on out, everything is pretty much out of the box. The script is commented, so you'll be able to see what it's doing. We're basically just scripting a way to use the Azure CLI tool. You could issue all of these commands individually and create the same service on your own. But basically, here's the code for creating a resource group, creating the server, creating that firewall rule I told you about, and then finally creating the database. There is one piece here to pay special attention to, and it's service objective. Something happened recently with Microsoft in regards to the scripting where the service objective of basic is no longer honored. So once you execute this script, you're going to have to go to your Azure portal and make sure that you check the billing, the pricing tier that was assigned. Because what I've seen happen is, for some reason, it doesn't like the word basic anymore. It used to take it just fine. And so now it'll provision like a $300 SQL Server for you instead of a $5 a month SQL Server. So with that all being said, I'm going to log in to Azure CLI. So let me just clear this out. Just AZ login. This is going to open up a browser window, and I'm going to authenticate using my Microsoft credentials. And here we go. And so you'll just choose the account that you want to associate with, and bingo. Your command line interface is now authenticated with Azure. So our bash script will pass those credentials when we start interacting with it. Or I should say when we execute it. So now I'm going to change directory to my script location, which is in SQL scripts. And there it is. So again, you should have made this script executable already. And so all you have to do is do something like this, but one little caveat. I want you to pipe this, or I should say append this to a log file so we can check it out later. And so I'm just going to do a log file. I like to put it in Markdown, so .md, and I'm going to hit go. And this will take about 2 minutes to execute. Okay, and I won't make you wait for that. I'll just edit the film a little bit here and see you in 2 minutes. All right, so our script is done running, and like you can see here, I warned you that service objective says command not found now for some reason. And just to let you know, I did open a GitHub issue regarding this. Anyway, we're going to verify our pricing tier right now, but just beware there. If you don't change your pricing tier right away, as you'll see in a moment, you just provisioned a $400 SQL Server instance. So the next thing you're going to do is log into your Azure portal. So just navigate to portal.azure.com, and I'm going to refresh my resource groups here. And as you will see, YouTube-RG should now have been provisioned. Yeah, it's running a little slow today. There she be. YouTube demo-rg, and inside of this you will see an Azure SQL Server and a database. Both have been provisioned. Okay, so to check the pricing tier, go ahead and click on the database itself, not the server, but the database. And as soon as that loads, you're going to click on, I think it's pricing tier. Okay, so notice out of the box it provisions a general purpose Gen 5 with 2 vCores. And again, when you look at the pricing on that, that is $406 a month or something like that. Again, something changed recently in these scripts that, you know, is suspect. Okay. So we're going to click right here, looking for basic, standard, premium. Click on basic, and we just went down to $4.99 a month. Hit apply, and you'll get a message up here in the corner saying database scaling is in process. So we'll let that cook for a little bit, go back to the documentation. So what we've done so far is, you know, you've all downloaded the script, customized the script, executed it, verified it in the portal. The next step is going to be to open up VS Code, and you're going to want to, again, make sure you have the MS SQL extension installed, and we're going to create a new file with a .sql extension. So if you're not familiar with VS Code, you're just going to go Control-N for new, and then Control-S for save, and just name it, you know, test. In my case, yeah, test.sql. So you actually do need to create an SQL file first to give the extension the proper context. So if we were trying to connect to our database without being inside of a SQL file, we'll get an error that says, sorry, you're out of context. All right, so to connect to our database, you're going to hit F1, brings up the menu, and then you're looking for MS SQL Connect. So you can actually type MS SQL, and you'll see every option for that extension. We're going to hit Connect. And the first thing it wants to know is, do we want to choose from an existing profile or create a new one? Let's go ahead and create a new one. And the first thing it asks for is our host name. Now, if you recall, we output all of our bash results to a log file. So I'm going to reach over here and grab that log file, and we can peek at that together. So I believe that was in Documents and Azure and Scripts, and it was called log file with the capital L. I'm going to open this up. Should open in VS Code. No worries. So here's our log file, and it has all the information that we're going to need for our provisioning here. The first thing it asks for is, what is the URL of that database? What's the host name? So I'm going to paste that in, hit enter. Next thing it wants to know is the database name. So if you were to scroll down through the log file that you created, it's near the bottom. There it is, YouTube-DB. This is another good reason to put those -db, -resource group, -server in your names there. Next thing it asks is, what type of authentication are you going to be using? So we're going to be using SQL login authentication. And the username, you're going to have to pull out of your password manager, or however you created your login name. And sweet, I did not save that, so I'm actually going to have to look in the script itself. This was an old reused name here, so Control V, boom, there's my username. And let's get the password. So that will not be in the log file, the plain text password won't. The next thing you want to do is you want to save the password. I'm going to hit yes and then enter a profile. So YouTube demo 2. Okay. So now I am provisioning my connection, and notice down here in the bottom it says connecting. Let me go back to my, okay, so it says MS SQL profile created and connected. That's a good sign. And where is my file? This looks like it here. Okay, so now we've connected our text editor to our brand new SQL database. Let's create that contained database user. Before you can create a user, you have to create a role for that user. Actually, I should say you can create the user first. So let's just let's go to my super secret script here. So you guys will also have this copy as well. So the first thing you're going to do is create that contained user. So we're going to call them PowerApps SQL and give them a nice long password here. So to execute just this line, you highlight it and then Control-Shift-E for execute. Choose your profile, which we just created. And now that SQL statement is running against our database. And you'll see the results down below here. So first thing was to create a user. Next thing we're going to do is create a role for that user to plug into. And again, you can have multiple users for one role. But the goal is to assign permissions to a role and then assign users to that role once it's been permissioned. So there you can see our command ran successfully. So I'm going to go back up here and highlight this single line, Control-Shift-E, and now we're creating that role. The next code to execute here is we're going to execute a stored procedure called add role member. And we're going to give that role database data reader and data writer permissions. Okay, so here's the name of that role. We're going to assign data reader and data writer permissions to that role. Okay, so I'm going to highlight this, Control-Shift-E for execute, and that is going to assign those permissions to the role. The last thing we're going to do is add the user that we created up here to the role, which already has permissions. Okay, so I'm going to wait for, okay, this is, again, you get that nice feedback down below here, command completed successfully. So I'm going to Control-Shift-E this last statement here. And some of the reasons I like having my SQL query engine, if you will, inside of my text editor is because I can do things like this, save a giant library of SQL statements, to reuse whenever I want. I can put them under version control. And you know, the way that I kind of amassed this library was as I was learning SQL, whenever I had a question, I'd hit Stack Exchange, find the answer, execute the query, manipulate it till I got it right where I wanted. I'd commented it and then boom, save it in my own library. And so now I have things like delete all records from a table, delete a single record, delete a table, and it just helped my memory as I was learning SQL statements, SQL syntax. So what we're going to do is we are going to now look up that user to make sure they are contained within the database. Because that's what we're building there, is what's known as a contained database user. So those user credentials are portable with the database, and that is kind of a unique feature of Azure SQL. So we are going to come up here and we are going to list, here it is, list all database user principals. Okay, so right now it shows me as disconnected, so let me connect to my profile. Sometimes it just kind of times out. And this is important. I don't know if you can see down at the very bottom of the screen down here, but you click on your connection and you get to choose between the databases on that server. So every SQL Server has a master database, keeps track of, you know, the table names and security and different things I haven't got too far into. But then here's the database that we also created. So we're going to first start with master, and I want to show you a couple things. The first thing I want to show you is watch which user names appear when we query the master database. It's going to help you understand why we created a contained database user and why we have a SQL Server admin user. So the results will pop up here in a second. And what you're going to see is our SQL admin. Remember that big long administrator name that we created there? They are present in the master database. But notice our user, not the admin, but the user we created is not present in the master database. So when we come over here and we change from the master database to the YouTube demo database and run this same query, Control-Shift-E, you're not going to see the admin, but you are going to see that contained database user that we created. So I'm going to let that run for a minute. I think I can even move over to our docs. Yep, and I still have my lower pane here. Just a heads up, I did do some tweaks on my VS Code to have this horizontal second, kind of screen down here. This is excellent for working with SQL. When you have it off to the side, you have to do a lot of scrolling. So I like it on the bottom when I'm working with SQL files. And there is that PowerApps SQL user in the database. Okay, so contained database users versus SQL admin users. All right, so that was everything that I wanted to do in this short video. Again, you'll be able to run through all the code here, and some further research that I would encourage you to do is really get to know the documentation around contained database users, why it's important. The second thing you should research is how to create Azure Active Directory based users. So remember, we just kind of created a static username and password for our contained user. And that's cool, but you don't want to have to pass credentials around your whole organization. It's better and more efficient to create Active Directory based users. So assign them to a role. And really you would assign typically a security group, an Azure Active Directory security group, to a SQL role. And that way you can more centrally manage your access to your database. You want to cut off people, you don't have to take the server down. Also, I encourage you to research how to backup and restore Azure SQL databases using either Azure Storage or download your backups locally to a .backpack file. And just to give you a little teaser, in some upcoming videos, I will create some relational tables in VS Code, and then we'll also connect these tables to PowerApps and Flow. So, hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it's really useful. That one's for you, Beef Easy, and good luck hacking. Have a great day.